I never thought I would be the kind of person who measures time by what happened before and after one night. But that's exactly how my life feels now, split cleanly down the middle by something I still don't fully understand and probably never will. Before that night, I believed fear was loud, sudden, and obvious, something that jumps out at you and leaves just as quickly. But afterward, I learned that real fear is quiet, patient, and perfectly willing to wait until you are calm enough to let your guard down. This happened when I took a short break from city life and returned to the town where I was born, a place small enough that roads didn't need names and forests began just beyond the last line of houses. Growing up there, the woods had always been part of daily life, something familiar and almost comforting. But after years away, I noticed immediately that something had changed. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper, and conversations always seemed to stop just short of saying something important, as if everyone shared an understanding they didn't want to put into words. During the day, everything appeared normal on the surface, but small details stood out the longer I stayed. Hunters talked about empty traps and missing game. Farmers complained about livestock acting strangely at night, and even the birds seemed to disappear earlier than usual, leaving the evenings unnaturally still. When I asked questions, people brushed them off with nervous smiles, telling me the forest was just going through one of its quiet phases, but no one ever looked me in the eye when they said it.
One evening, driven more by curiosity than sense, I decided to take a drive along the old road that cuts straight through the forest, the same road I had traveled countless times as a teenager without a second thought. The sky was clear, the moon full and bright enough to cast long shadows across the asphalt, and for the first few minutes, the drive felt almost peaceful, the steady rhythm of the road calming my thoughts as tall trees closed in on both sides. As I went deeper into the forest, the absence of life became impossible to ignore. There were no deer near the roadside, no rustling in the underbrush, no distant calls echoing through the trees, only the hum of my engine and the sound of my own breathing filling the car. That silence pressed against me, making every mile feel longer than the last, and for the first time I considered turning back, but pride kept my hands steady on the wheel. The impact came without warning. Something struck the front of my car with enough force to jolt me forward, the tires screeching as I slammed the brakes, my heart pounding violently as the car came to a sudden stop. For several seconds, I sat frozen, staring through the windshield, trying to process what had just happened, until my headlights illuminated a shape lying motionless on the road ahead.
It was a deer. At least, that's what I told myself at first. When I stepped out of the car, the night air felt colder than it should have, and as I approached the body, dread settled deep in my chest. The injuries were wrong, too severe and too deliberate to be explained by an accident alone. There were massive claw-like gashes along its side, deep bite marks torn into flesh, and its stomach was nearly split open, the damage looking less like impact and more like the result of an attack fueled by overwhelming strength. That was when I heard something moving in the trees. The sound wasn't rushed or frantic, but slow and intentional, branches bending and grass parting as whatever it was made its way toward the road. My mind raced, desperately trying to label it as a bear, a mountain lion, anything familiar enough to fear in a normal way, but my instincts were already screaming at me to get away. I didn't hesitate. I ran back into the car, locked the doors, turned off every light, and sat there in total darkness, barely breathing, my eyes fixed on the road ahead as shadows shifted at the edge of my vision. When it finally emerged, my brain tried to understand it by calling it human, because that was the only shape fear could recognize. but the longer I looked, the more that explanation collapsed. Its skin reflected the moonlight unevenly, slick and textured like a crocodile's hide, stretched over a body that seemed too fluid, too adaptable, as if it didn't have a fixed structure beneath it. There was no hair, no clothing, no visible emotion on its face.
There was no hair, no clothing, no visible emotion on its face. It moved with a smoothness that felt unnatural, every step deliberate and effortless, as if gravity itself had less influence over it. When it crouched beside the deer, it did so calmly, without urgency, feeding in a way that felt practiced and disturbingly routine, as though this was something it had done many times before, unseen and undisturbed. Watching it, I felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness, not just fear, but the certainty that I was witnessing something that existed far outside the rules I understood. This wasn't a creature defending territory or fighting for survival. It was simply feeding, confident and unafraid, as though the forest itself belonged to it. When it finally lifted its head and looked directly at me, time seemed to slow, the weight of its gaze pressing down on me until my chest tightened painfully. There was no anger in its eyes, no curiosity, only awareness, the unmistakable sense that it had known I was there long before I realized it was watching. That was the moment I broke. I started the car without thinking, the engine roaring as I accelerated down the road, my hands shaking uncontrollably as the trees blurred past. I didn't look in the mirrors because I was terrified of what I might see, but I could feel it behind me, keeping pace effortlessly, close enough that my fear felt justified and useless all at once. I didn't stop driving until the forest thinned and the road opened back into familiar territory, my body finally giving in as panic caught up to me, my chest tight and my vision swimming as I pulled over and struggled to breathe. I woke up in a hospital hours later. Villagers told me they had found my car abandoned near the edge of the forest and called for help. And when I asked about the deer, about the marks on the road, about anything that might prove I hadn't imagined it, they shook their heads. There had been no animal, no blood, no signs of an attack, only long skid marks where my brakes had locked suddenly. I left the town shortly after and returned to the city, but some things don't stay behind when you leave. Even now, years later, I avoid forest roads at night, and whenever moonlight filters through trees just right, I remember how easily the dark can reveal what it's been hiding all along, and how close I came to learning what happens when curiosity leads you somewhere you were never meant to stand.